about these women who were earning starvation wages, while their shareholders were getting 20% returns, thank you very much, on their dividends. Not bad. She went down to investigate. She wrote an article, incredibly punchy article, called White Slavery in London. All kinds of associations around the term white slaves. It refers to sweated labour, nothing new under the sun, sweated labour very much at this time. And it also referred to scandals at the time about women being traded, trafficked really, and shipped abroad to foreign brothels. There was a lot of concern about this. So white slaves was a really controversial term, and she knew it. She would get an interesting account of the match women and of a middle-class person encountering working-class women, because they just didn't. It's amazing how classes were segregated in the East End. With the steam trains, the middle-class people move out into the suburbs, the new suburbs, and the East Enders are just left to get on with it, really. And it's appalling, the city of dreadful night, they call it. People are starving, there's no real infrastructure. The middle classes, meanwhile, take tours back into the East End, and it's called the Mysterious East, and they have walking tours accompanied by 2 policemen. And so you go and look at the strange poor people, the strange things that they do. So Annie Besant sees them, and she says immediately you look at them, and you can sort of see, when you look at this most famous photograph of them, they were incredibly small and frail-looking, even for women of their class and women of their time. And this is because the ones that were youngest when these very low wages were driven in by Bryant and May were malnourished. They literally couldn't grow properly physically because they were teenage girls when they were working. The thing that they feared most, however, and again something that you might have heard of, is phossy jaw. You might have heard people talk about phossy jaw or phosphorus necrosis. And that was the horrible, really grim, sorry if you just had your supper or you're just about to, industrial disease of matchmaking. White phosphorus caused it, the fumes of white phosphorus. Didn't have to use it, there was a safe alternative, but Bryant and May, again, were very modern in their approach, they made the business case. We'd love to use red phosphorus, we understand it might be safer, although we're debating that, of course, but what our customers want, matches made with white phosphorus. What you've got to give the punters what you want, what can we do about it? What would happen with particles of phosphorus was that the match women would bring a bit of bread in, was all you'd eat, you'd live on bread and tea, literally every meal, if you were working class. They'd leave their bread on their workbench. By the time they got to eat it, the particles, these noxious phosphorus particles in the air, have settled on your bread, so you've got this deadly seasoning of poison, basically. That gives it an easy route into your mouth. You'd have holes in your teeth in those days if you were working class, missing teeth and so on. The jawbone starts to decay, and pieces of bone the size of peas, apparently, would work their way out through abscesses. Factory inspectors tell us later that they find match workers everywhere there's match manufacture, on the outskirts of cities, living like lepers, really, because the odour from these awful abscesses is just horrific. Even family members can't stand to have sufferers under their roof. That's where Annie Besant ends her article, and everyone's conclusion, well, there you go. A week after this, the women go on strike. Bob's your uncle. Annie Besant must have led the strike. That's where I came in. I was a trade unionist, and I certainly wasn't an academic, but I did know a bit about strikes. I'd left school at 15, but I started on a labour history course for the T&G, as was back in the day. I thought, well, we had a little essay to do, which I thought was, oh my God, it was about 500 words. I thought, I'll never get on. My goodness, I'm never going to write anything about them. I went to the Bryant and May archives and started researching it. What I couldn't quite figure from all the accounts I'd read was how. How does a middle-class woman apparently just turn up at the factory gates and bring 1,400 workers out on strike? She's not a match worker. They will never have seen her before. Do you just turn up in your frock and say, I say, girls, the Bathing Society have had a vote, and you're all going out on strike? I can imagine the response, because I've worked with these 10 women, and it wouldn't be particularly printable, I wouldn't have thought. I went through every account I could find from all the best historians, trying to find what were her tactics. I thought I could use them possibly in the future myself. Or nothing, just, oh, well, she was a socialist, so there you go. She obviously wanted these people to go on strike. She would have been alone in the Bathing Society because their policy was extremely anti-strike, actually, at this point. And the more I researched it, the more it didn't add up. I read the whole of her article, White Slavery in London, the whole of her newspaper, the link that she published it in, because Bryant and May helped me out by keeping everything related to the strike in their archives. They're really useful. She called for a boycott. She never mentions a strike. She talks about how, when the strike finally happened, she's at pains to say, this is a terrible idea. This is a complete mistake. The girls will go back to work. Constantly emphasises this. Well, they wouldn't actually go back to work at all. And around the time when she is writing this, they are marching to Parliament. This was so shocking. Poor East End women out of the East End, out of their place, literally in every sense, that it stops traffic. Passers-by jeered at them and catcalled and threw things at them because what were they doing in the posh parts of town? When they were in with MPs, and again we get this kind of class incomprehension, the MPs say, do you know, they were quite intelligent, we could understand what they said and everything. They could string sentences together. And one girl who was about 12 had these lovely golden ringlets under her bonnet, but when she got in, she swept off her bonnet and she was bald because she'd been carrying wooden pallets full of matchboxes for such a long time on her head that it actually worn away all of her hair. This is how the tide changes. Political pressure gets put on Bryant and May, and this is the only reason that they cave in, and they do cave in, with the worst grace you can possibly imagine. Absolutely furious, because they've been bested by these rough girls. How dare they? How dare they not know their place? We are gentlemen, and how dare they tell us what to do? The women go back to work, and they don't just demand reinstatement, because Bryant and May have sacked them all the minute they walked out. They also demand the right to form the biggest union of women and girls in the country. They did not have a union. This is really, really key. They went on strike despite having no union, despite having no strike pay. Unions at this time we wouldn't really recognise today. They tended to organise the elites of the craftsmen, you know, the sort of top-hatted, ultra-skilled male workers. Didn't really, all of them, want what they called the mob of labour, the casual workers, the sweated labourers, spoiling it for the, you know, the respectable, proper trade unionists who believed they could win concessions for themselves by being terribly respectable and sort of, you know, being friends with the government. This union starts. The next year, you may have heard of the Great Dock Strike of 1889, enormous strike, spreads to like a general strike. This is traditionally given as the beginning of the labour movement. Everything we know, the modern labour movement, wave of strikes, all of these exploited workers forming their own unions. But it just, again, doesn't add up. Historians have said, well, yeah, okay, the matchwomen technically went on strike before, okay, but they didn't start it because they didn't influence anybody, because they were only women and nobody knew them and they were, you know, it was just a silly girly event. It was just nothing important. Well, the dockers said differently. You couldn't have been much more macho in your ideas about gender, surely, than an East End docker in the Victorian periods. But they said, John Burns said, strike leader, later an MP, the matchwomen went on strike. This gave us inspiration. This gave us courage. We went to the Matchwomen's Union at the end of their strike and said, can you tell us how to do it? Historians have managed to go, no, I can't hear that, and sort of conveniently ignore all this. Again and again through the dock strike, they stood up at mass meetings and said, remember the match girls who won their fight and formed a union. Hundreds of thousands of people present. Nobody says, oh, you know, the match girls, they worked at Bryant and May. Everyone, they assume their whole audience knows exactly who the match girls are. So not influential, you know, I beg to differ. This is really the start. These are the mothers of the labour movement. They're the mothers of the modern trade union movement and the Labour Party, which of course is why the Labour Party have so much love for trade unions traditionally, because this is what they come out of. Needs celebrating, I think. I hope you'll agree. Brilliant role models, I think. What better role models for young girls and women than, you know, really lippy, rebellious, teenage Irish girls who weren't averse to a ruck, who wore very big hats, which were their own uniform and everyone thought were very common. Because they had big hats, they had enormous hat pins, and if you gave them any trouble, they would produce their hat pins. They were literally dressed to kill. They threatened Jack the Ripper, apparently. They said, if we get our hands on him, that'll be an end to Jack the Ripper. And I think what a pity they didn't. Down in Whitechapel back alley with their hat pins at the ready, there would have been far fewer deaths. So, worth celebrating, I think. 6th of July this year, 125th anniversary. We are going to have a festival. It's not going to be just your usual suspects and you know, the same people making speeches. It's going to be a fun day out that the matchmen would enjoy too. There will be dancing, there will be an element of drinking. There will hopefully not be the punch-ups that the matchwomen might have had, although you never know. There will be John Hegley, Francis O'Grady from the TUC, Michael Rosen will be doing children's events, Kate Hardy, the actor, Steve White and the Protest Family, a fantastic rock band, the Ruby Kids, who you young people might know. I gather he's one of those hip-hop people. A really wonderful lineup, I'm so delighted to say, and all free. Really important that it is a family day out. You can bring your kids. There will be free events for kids. There will also be shopping too, because there will be stalls. We might even brew our own beer. So please come along and celebrate it, and please get your union to donate some money to us, because we really need it. Thank you very much for listening.